of human exploration as the Andromeda Initiative arrives in the Andromeda Galaxy, along with 100,000 colonists from the Milky Way to make a new home for humanity, and the Solarians, the Turians, the Asari, and even the Krogan. So there's a lot of races, and the premise of it is similar in a way, perhaps, to Stargate Atlantis, going to places no one's ever been to, exploring the unknown in another galaxy. Similar thing. And things that don't go as well as you might think. And that's the way I approach the Mass Effect Andromeda trial, pushing the limits of what I could do. In theory, you're limited in the trial to a specific area on the Nexus and on Eos, the desert world. Level 1 radiation area. You can go to the level 3 radiation area, but you'll die very quickly if you're on foot. But you can push those limits by getting in the tank in the Nomad and exploring, because you realize that the Nomad only loses a small amount of its HP in the high level radiation area. And so you have a great deal of time to explore. And that's what I did. And in doing so, I found this safe space, so to speak, where I found myself engaged in a firefight with the Ket, the main antagonists of the game, based on everything I've seen. The trial is about 10 hours long. You can extend it if you actually switch Origin account and pay for Origin access on that account, so you can, and your saves transfer over, so there's no problem. If you want to play more, you can pay more, and you'll be able to play more. But there's a number of issues, a large number of issues with this. There are some things I think it does well, but my biggest issue with Mass Effect Andromeda is that it's a mediocre game. Same combat system as Mass Effect 3 multiplayer, which is more flexibility and maneuverability. Same graphics as in other Frostbite games. Nothing impressive about the graphics. In fact, it's a downgrade compared to other titles made in the Frostbite engine. Same kind of story elements as in other Bioware games. Same kind of dialogue wheel as in, say, Dragon Age Inquisition, though less schizophrenic in terms of your dialogue options. So there's more consistency in the dialogue than what you had in, say, previous Bioware games. Like, there's a consistency in a conversation, regardless of the options you pick in a dialogue. So you don't have an option where you're like this evil bad guy and then you go back to speaking normally, for instance. So there's a consistency on that level, even though you do have dialogue options and they do have an impact. But really, there's nothing really impressive about it. There's no radical change. There's no real innovation. It's just a bunch of elements from a bunch of Bioware games taken together and thrown into another game. I guess it's, in many ways, it's a well-built package with high production values. In some ways, it falls short. In some ways, in some ways, it just really, doesn't really speak to me. It doesn't really kindle my interest, so to speak. And there's a good number of issues, big issues. Number one, the issue with the Andromeda trial is that it's a paid demo, in effect. You pay money to be able to play the game for a certain period of time for you to determine whether or not it's actually worth buying the full game. Now, obviously, you get a lot more than this. You get a lot more than just this trial with Origin access. But the fact that you have to pay a fee to be able to play what is in effect a demo, even though you download the full game, but it is a demo of that game. As your progress gets saved and all that, and even in multiplayer progress, it's still a demo. And I'm not happy with the fact that you have a paid demo for a game. The other big issue is the downgrade. There is a visual downgrade in Mass Effect Andromeda compared to some of the very early trailers. Now, to be fair to Bioware, those trailers did mention that it was in-engine footage, not in-game footage. But this is where we get, after all the things Ubisoft did with all the games where they visually downgraded, and people accepted that. And then people accepted it with The Witcher 3. CD Projekt lied their ass off to people in their faces. They said that the footage they showed was in-game footage. And on top of that, they even went so far as to claim that the game will look better than what we were seeing in the trailer. Swords of Destiny, VGX. That was not reality. That didn't end up happening. That was all a bunch of lies. The thing that always bothered me with the visual downgrade controversies when it came to Ubisoft and CD Projekt Red wasn't so much that they did those downgrades themselves, but rather because they lied about it. They blatantly lied about it, pretended they did nothing wrong. CD Projekt in particular was really terrible at this because they went as far as to ban people from their forums from consistently bringing this issue up. Well, maybe people wouldn't bring the issue up if you owned up to it and you stopped lying to people's faces and pretended that your game was perfect. The marketing period and the way the community managers handled the issue was flat out terrible. Now, I don't have that grudge with Bioware, but I still consider it a problem that you have game after game after game being released with visual downgrades. And people accept that. Look, it shouldn't be fine. It shouldn't be fine. And yet this is the new normal in the gaming industry. And it's the new normal because not only CD Projekt got away with it, they got rewarded for it. It got the most Game of the Year awards in gaming history. Despite everything they did, despite the censorship, despite the fact they lied to, like banning people from their forums, refusing to talk about it, pretending it wasn't an issue, dismissing the issue. And then they did a bunch of other crap as well. For instance, they worked, because of their inexperience at doing a multi-platform game, and because they wanted to make such a big game, the cost of The Witcher 3 was that they essentially worked their game developers very long hours. There's numerous complaints from people that work for CD Projekt Red, and yet that is accepted in the gaming industry in this day and age. It was accepted, and it's been made worse. And so accepting things like the downgrade, accepting things like the crunch time, it's not acceptable. There are obviously issues with those games, but that's an issue that because the company didn't plan things as they should have. I mean, Bioware had 5 years to make Mass Effect Andromeda, and this is what we get in 5 years. 5 years. A full team working on this game, and this is the best we've got. Pardon me for stating the obvious. This ain't good enough. It's simply not good enough. It doesn't justify it. Doesn't justify this amount of... Like, when a game is made in 5 years, you know what I want? A GTA 5. That's a game that you can see really the effort that was put into it. Or hell, even Witcher 3. There were a lot of innovations and changes and improvements compared to... And things that Witcher 3 did that no other game did. No other RPG did. I have a lot of criticism that I can bring against CD Projekt Red, but they did push the limits. They did redefine an entire genre. They did it with Witcher 2 as well. Bioware used to do that. They did it with Mass Effect 1. They did it with Mass Effect 2. They did it with Dragon Age Inquisition to an extent. They are no longer doing it. They're not interested. That's what Mass Effect Andromeda is. That's the biggest issue from everything I've seen so far, from what I've played, from what I've heard, from what I've seen. It is fundamentally an incremental change type game. It is not radical change. It's not really a great deal of... There's no great deal of innovation in this game. And that, to my mind, is the biggest disappointment when it comes to it. On the issue of a story, which is a very important element of the Mass Effect series, and an important element of any Bioware game, there were several moral dilemmas present in the main trilogy. Two of the biggest dilemmas were the AI-organic conflict, which has essentially been resolved, and then the Genophage conflict, the Salarian-Turian-Krogan conflict, in effect. Well, the Genophage conflict is made mute by the fact that the Krogan are moving past it, as evidenced by the Krogan you meet in Andromeda. So it's like, yeah, we developed a natural immunity. Now, this is something more than actually mentions in Mass Effect 2, and that the work he did when it came to the Genophage was to actually deal with the natural immunity the Krogan were developing towards the Genophage to prevent them from developing it. Whereas the Krogan in Andromeda, they apparently mutated in stasis. They went through mutation in stasis and increased their viability. Okay, so the Genophage rendered mute. Then, going back to the AI conflict, the AI organic conflict, that's also render meal. Let's listen to Alec Ryder, the initial Pathfinder, which you replace, and your father in the game.
Define this advantage.
It will set us free. We're prisoners of our own five senses. There's a reality greater than ours that we can't perceive, but an AI can.
How?
By augmenting our own abilities and adding a few new ones.
Well, none of that stopped those Geth from revolting.
Because they were separate from their creators. But AIs and humans interface directly, experiencing the world together, benefits both. There's no creator to revolt against.
So, beyond any particulars of the AI organic conflict and the fact that you now have a symbiotic relationship with an AI in Mass Effect Andromeda, you have an AI in your head with a quantum tied. You have an AI that communicates with you through a quantum entanglement device and has a deep connection to your brain. Kind of scary. And apparently that relationship is perfectly fine. No issue. You know what that is? Beyond anything you might say on this particular point, this particular story issue, that's synthesis. The synthesis ending incarnate. That's Mac Walters, who's still with Bioware, who still worked on this game, basically taking a dump in everyone's face that despised Bioware for Mass Effect 3, and despised EA, and despised the synthesis ending. Hell, even people that like Mass Effect 3 hated the synthesis ending. There were the majority of players picked destroy. Then a significant portion, including myself, picked control. Then only a very small portion of people picked synthesis. And it's not because we didn't have the EMS points to do it. It's because synthesis was stupid. And it was hated. And it was viewed as highly unethical. And yet, Mac Walters is basically like, no. Synthesis is the right choice. And he said that when Mass Effect 3 came out. When there was that whole controversy surrounding this issue. He said that. My artistic integrity matters more than what the people that play my game feel about it. Well, the people that play your games would want to punch you in the face for being such a gigantic asshole towards your fan base. And that's what Mac Walters just did. He's a gigantic asshole towards the people that play his games. And the people that really like the Mass Effect series. And guess what? He just threw a middle finger their way. He doesn't give a shit. All that controversy, EA voted as the worst company in America twice. The massive backlash against Bioware that we hoped, people hoped at the time Bioware would have learned the lesson. And it seemed with Inquisition that they had. But with Mass Effect, it seems they haven't. It seems they've learned nothing. It seems that the lessons the Mass Effect team drew from all of this is that we don't need to actually change anything about our formula. Oh, let's just make it open world, more maneuverable and all that. Oh, by the way, while we're doing that, while Bioware is also doing that, you know what they did? They removed customization options for your squad. You can no longer choose the weapons your squad mates have. You no longer have alternate appearances for your squad, let alone the armor options that you had available for your squad members in Mass Effect 1. You have less abilities than Mass Effect 3, and about the same level as Mass Effect 2. So it seems that Bioware took the wrong lessons. And there are a lot of issues that I have with Mass Effect Andromeda. And there's also things that they could have done that they didn't do. For instance, I would love nothing more than to be able to get on my ship on foot, as opposed to going through a loading screen. Why can't I do that organically? That creates immersion. Say what you will about The Witcher 3, and there's a lot of things that I hate about The Witcher 3. But the fact that the way for the fast travel system is done, the way you enter buildings and all that, it's very organic. Now, fast travel, you can't just teleport randomly from one place of the map to another place of the map. You actually have to go to a specific area, to a post, and then use that to go to another post. So you still have to travel a lot by foot, even after you found these places. Not the case in Mass Effect Andromeda. On top of that, the world doesn't really feel organic. Like, people have compared it to, because this is still the Dragon Age Inquisition type of open world, which is something they ripped off from Knights of the Old Republic, the MMO. In the sense, the hubs don't really have a lot of organic interactions with NPCs. NPCs don't really just walk on the streets. They're not going around their lives. They're pretty much dead. That's what I've seen so far. And it really feels like a video gaming world, an artificial world, or an artificial universe, as opposed to a live one, which is something CD Projekt has always done so well and Bioware has always done so poorly. And they said they would have learned lessons from Witcher 3. Turns out they didn't learn some of the more important lessons from Witcher 3. Now, I'm not saying that this game should be Witcher 3, make no mistake on that. I do want a Mass Effect game, but I think that the Mass Effect game could have an organic universe. I do feel a Mass Effect game could have far better voice acting and facial animations and animations in general. I feel a Bioware game could do a lot better on the story level. I feel a Bioware game could not take the piss on its own fans with the crap they did with the AI in this one. And ultimately, you gotta ask yourself, with the Gen of Age conflict resolved and the AI conflict resolved, two of the main conflicts, especially the AI one, being the main conflict of the series, what are we left? What kind of moral dilemma are we left with in Mass Effect Andromeda? Dragon Age Inquisition had the religious debate and the rise of the Inquisitor, your role in the Inquisition, the politicking and all that. What's left for Andromeda? The civilian-military conflict, tensions between the civilians and military in the game. Like, that's been a thing as well in Mass Effect. But the problem that I have with that is that civilian control is always portrayed in a negative light, whereas military control is always portrayed in a more positive light. Although I guess you could say that typical politicians are portrayed in a very negative light, whereas technocrats are portrayed in a very positive light. I mean, I think it says something that the two more likable characters out of the 4 leader council in charge of the initiative, one of them is engineer, the other guy is in charge of the military, and the two that people hate, especially one that people hate the most, they're essentially civilian leaders, political leaders, typical politician. There's Addison, who's a contemptible bitch, and then there's Director Fan, the Solarian, who, pretty sure if people are given an option, people will blow his head off. And it seems that we are headed towards a coup d'etat. I mean, the Krogan pretty much spells it out for you in a datapad that you can find. Look, my perspective overall on the issue of Mass Effect Andromeda. It's still a fun game, don't get me wrong. There's a bunch of criticism I have, but most of that criticism is, after half a decade, I expected more. I didn't have high expectations. I didn't. Let me be clear on this. I didn't have high expectations. My expectations were really rock bottom. But is this really all that Bioware is capable of doing? Is this the net effect, the result of 5 years of development? Is this all they can do, all they can achieve? This was a company that redefined gaming as we know. I'm not talking a genre. I'm talking gaming with their games in the past. And this is all they're capable of doing in the modern age. Rehashing old storylines from the past, rehashing dialogue wheels, using engines made by other companies and not doing a really good job with them either. Not really pushing them to their limits. And having a glitchy game with bad animations. On the issue of animations, I find that particularly infuriating. Because the argument they always throw at us is, oh, we have the character creator, CD Projekt does not. Yeah, but the way CD Projekt tackles that issue, because they do have a bunch of characters that where they don't put as much effort as others. The main characters have far more time spent in them in terms of their animations, in terms of the lip syncing than others. The main ones. So insignificant characters, side quest characters, all that, they barely get any attention in terms of lip syncing. But they have this, they obviously have lip syncing and they have some animations that they use for those characters. And hell, they even copy the faces and facial structures from a lot of characters and move on to next. They just do a good job with hats and clothing and all that in CD Projekt games. Bioware, but there is a high quality effort for the main characters in Witcher 3 to make them have good animations. And it works. And In Mass Effect, in Bioware games, there is no effort. The excuse that, oh, your main character is customizable. Hey, if you gave me that option, I would go with the default character, the way he looked. Or she looked. If I could get high quality lip syncing and facial animations for that character, as opposed to the crap we get on any character. And hell, the default characters probably look the worst in terms of animations and lip syncing. And the customization options as well leave a lot to be desired. I mean, I didn't have a lot of time to customize my character, so I kind of rushed it. I picked a default face and made a couple of tweaks. I mean, pretty much all the default characters that they give you look like crap, male or female. And this is all they've got. This is Bioware. This is Mass Effect Andromeda. So, I am being harsh, and I am being critical. But I kind of feel that for a company that's this big, that has so much money, that's backed by a company like Electronic Arts, they could do a lot better. They should do a lot better. And they are not. They did do a lot better in the past. They're no longer doing it. Costin here on Serious Gaming, signing out.